Part 1. The Wisdom of Solitude in Our Later Years. As we journey through life, reaching our golden years, we often find ourselves yearning for something deeper: solitude. It's a natural transition, one that is often misunderstood by younger generations. Why do some elderly people prefer solitude over social interactions? Today, we explore the experiences of Mr. Lee and Mrs. Nguyen, two individuals whose life stories reveal the profound importance of respecting personal boundaries, understanding social cues, and embracing the quiet comforts of solitude. These lessons may change the way you view aging and the social dynamics that come with it. Mr. Lee's story, The Peace in Solitude. Mr. Lee, now 60, has gradually come to value the peace that solitude brings. In his youth, Mr. Lee was a social butterfly, always active in gatherings, parties, and family events. He was the life of every gathering, effortlessly bringing people together. But as the years passed, he began to feel differently. Solitude, once something he avoided, became a source of comfort. "I used to thrive on social energy," Mr. Lee recalls, smiling at the memory. "But now I find peace in the quiet moments of life. I enjoy a cup of tea in the morning, tending to my garden or reading a good book. The noise of the world, which once felt exciting, now feels overwhelming at times." For Mr. Lee, solitude is not about loneliness. It's about finding contentment in one's own company without the need for constant interaction. He still enjoys the company of close friends and family, but he now cherishes the freedom to choose when and how to socialize. A lifestyle shift. The shift in Mr. Lee's social habits did not go unnoticed. A relative once remarked, "You used to be so warm and welcoming. Why are you distant now?" But Mr. Lee wasn't offended by the comment. He understood the confusion. "As we grow older, our lifestyle naturally changes," he explained. "We've seen much in life, experienced its highs and lows, and now we seek a different kind of fulfillment." Mr. Lee's life became quieter, not because he lost his warmth, but because his priorities shifted. At 60, he prefers to spend his time nurturing his inner peace rather than keeping up with the fast-paced social obligations of his youth. He finds joy in tending to his garden, walking in the park, or simply sitting in the tranquility of his home, savoring a moment of reflection. The true nature of friendships. In his youth, Mr. Lee had many friends, but over time he realized that not all friendships endure. You start to see that not everyone who comes and goes in your life is a true friend, Mr. Lee reflects. Some relationships were built on convenience or social expectations. At this stage in life, I value genuine connections over the superficial ones. This realization was liberating for Mr. Lee. He stopped feeling the need to maintain relationships that no longer brought him joy or fulfillment. Instead, he focused on the people who mattered most: his family, a few close friends, and, most importantly, himself. Rather than pretending to be polite or entertaining guests out of obligation, I've learned that it's better to be alone and enjoy my own company. That way, I feel free, he says. Solitude gives me the space to reflect and grow. Part 2. The Hidden Social Dynamics of Visiting. For many older adults, the decision to visit others or welcome guests into their homes becomes more complex with age. What was once an open invitation for socializing may now feel like a disturbance. This brings us to the story of Mr. Chu, a man who learned the delicate art of balancing friendship with respect for personal boundaries the hard way. Mr. Chu's story. the misunderstanding of invitations. Mr. Chu, a jovial man in his early 60s, was known for his friendly demeanor. One day, while strolling through his neighborhood, he was delighted to run into an old high school classmate. The unexpected reunion filled Mr. Chu with joy, as he had fond memories of their youth together. His friend, equally pleased to see him, casually invited him over for drinks. At first, Mr. Chu was thrilled. After all, it had been years since he had spent time with his old friend. He eagerly accepted the invitation and brought along a few dishes to share. His friend's wife greeted him politely, but her demeanor seemed a bit strained. Mr. Chu didn't think much of it and enjoyed the evening. Encouraged by the initial warm reception, Mr. Chu started visiting more frequently. Every weekend, he would bring food and drinks to his friend's house, expecting the same level of hospitality. But after a few weeks, his friend's wife began to show signs of frustration, and the atmosphere at the gatherings became tense. A lesson in social cues. Eventually, Mr. Chu's friend pulled him aside. "My wife and children feel that our weekends are being disturbed," his friend admitted reluctantly. "Your visits, while appreciated, are becoming too frequent, and it's affecting our family time." Mr. Chu was taken aback. He had thought his visits were welcome, that his presence was a source of joy. But in reality, his friend's initial invitation had been more of a polite gesture than an open-ended offer. Mr. Chu had misunderstood the social cues and unintentionally overstepped the boundaries of hospitality. Respecting personal space. This experience was eye-opening for Mr. Chu. He realized that even well-meaning actions can cause discomfort if they are not carefully considered. His friend's family needed their own space, their own time to unwind, and his frequent visits had become an intrusion. Mr. Chu's story teaches us that as we age, we must be mindful of the personal space and boundaries of others, even those closest to us. Social interactions, especially in old age, are often about balance, being present without overwhelming others, offering companionship without becoming a burden. Part 3. The weight of words and social consequences. The words we choose to speak can have a profound impact, especially in social settings. As we age, conversations can sometimes take on a life of their own, with unintended consequences. This brings us to the story of Mrs. Nguyen, a well-meaning woman whose casual remark about her daughter-in-law spiraled into a family conflict that changed her perspective on visiting others. Mrs. Nguyen's story, the casual remark that caused a rift. Mrs. Nguyen, a retired teacher with a lively social life, spent much of her free time with friends from her community. On sunny days, they danced in the local square. On rainy days, they gathered at each other's homes for tea and conversation. These gatherings brought her joy, as they allowed her to stay connected and active in her later years. One afternoon, while visiting a neighbor's house, the conversation turned to family dynamics. Mrs. Nguyen casually mentioned that her daughter-in-law didn't take much initiative around the house, adding with a laugh that perhaps being married to an only child had spoiled her daughter-in-law a bit. Mrs. Nguyen thought nothing of the comment. It was a light-hearted remark among friends, intended to be humorous. But word travels fast, and soon her daughter-in-law heard the story. Except by the time it reached her ears, the comment had morphed into something far more critical. Family conflict and regret. Mrs. Nguyen's daughter-in-law was deeply hurt by the remark, feeling that her mother-in-law was dissatisfied with her. The once warm relationship between them grew cold. Mrs. Nguyen's son, caught in the middle, scolded his mother for gossiping and creating tension within the family. What had once been a happy household was now filled with awkward silences and unspoken resentment. "I didn't mean to cause any harm," Mrs. Nguyen reflected, clearly saddened by the situation. "It was just a passing comment, but it hurt my daughter-in-law more than I could have imagined. Now I think twice before I speak, especially about family." The dangers of gossip. Mrs. Nguyen's story highlights the dangers of gossip, even when it seems innocent. Words have a way of taking on a life of their own, especially when spoken about sensitive topics like family. A casual remark, when misunderstood or misinterpreted, can cause deep wounds that are difficult to heal. As a result, Mrs. Nguyen became more cautious in her social interactions. She still enjoys spending time with her friends, but she's learned to steer clear of conversations that might lead to gossip or negativity. "It's better to dance together and talk less about others," she says with a smile. Key takeaway: thoughtful communication. The lesson from Mrs. Nguyen's experience is clear. We must be thoughtful in our communication, especially as we grow older. It's easy for misunderstandings to arise, and the consequences of a careless comment can be far-reaching. By choosing our words carefully and focusing on positive interactions, we can avoid unnecessary conflict and maintain harmony in our relationships. Part 4. The economic divide and psychological strain. In addition to social and family dynamics, another reason many elderly individuals avoid frequent social visits is the psychological strain caused by economic differences. These differences can create feelings of inadequacy or envy, even among friends and neighbors. Let's explore the story of Mrs. Pham, a widow who experienced the discomfort that comes from comparing her life to others. Mrs. Pham's story: the burden of comparison. Mrs. Pham, a widow in her late 60s, lived modestly on her pension. She had a small, cozy home and lived a simple life. But her neighbors, who were wealthier, often invited her to their lavish homes for social gatherings. While Mrs. Pham appreciated their kindness, each visit left her feeling inadequate. "I would go to their houses and see the beautiful furniture, the expensive decorations, and I couldn't help but compare it to my own home," Mrs. Pham admitted. "It made me feel small, like I didn't belong." Choosing solitude for peace of mind. Over time, Mrs. Pham began declining invitations. It wasn't that she didn't like her neighbors, she enjoyed their company, but the constant comparison between her life and theirs took a toll on her mental well-being. She found more peace and contentment in staying home, enjoying her own space, and focusing on the things that brought her joy. "It's not about being lonely," Mrs. Pham explained. "It's about choosing peace over the stress of comparison. My home may not be as grand, but it's mine, and I've learned to be content with what I have." Key takeaway: the freedom of independence. Mrs. Pham's story teaches us that solitude can be a source of freedom, especially in a world where social and economic comparisons are inevitable. By choosing to focus on her own life, rather than constantly comparing herself to others, Mrs. Pham found inner peace. Solitude, for her, became a way to maintain mental well-being and avoid the stress that comes from social pressures. Part 5. The greatest assets after 50. As we age, the things we once valued may shift in importance. In our younger years, we often focus on building careers, accumulating wealth, and achieving success. But as we enter our 50s and beyond, we begin to realize that our most valuable assets are not material possessions, but the intangible things that bring us peace, happiness, and fulfillment. Let's explore the 4 greatest assets that can make life after 50 truly meaningful: health, family, financial stability, and a positive mental state. First, health, the foundation of happiness. Mrs. Tran, now in her 60s, learned the hard way that health is the most important asset as we age. In her younger years, she often neglected her health, eating poorly, skipping exercise, and avoiding doctor's visits. It wasn't until she began experiencing serious health issues that she realized the impact of her lifestyle choices. "I was constantly in and out of the hospital," Mrs. Tran recalled. "My health problems were a burden not only to me, but to my family. My children had to take time off work to care for me, and it caused a lot of stress." Determined to turn her life around, Mrs. Tran made significant changes to her diet and exercise routine. Over time, her health improved dramatically, and she was able to live more independently, freeing her children from the constant worry about her well-being. "Your health is more valuable than anything else," Mrs. Tran said. "Without it, nothing else matters." 2. Family, the irreplaceable treasure. Mr. Nguyen, a once successful businessman, learned the painful lesson that family is more important than wealth. In his younger years, he focused on his career, often neglecting his family in favor of work. He had an affair, which eventually led to the breakdown of his marriage. "My wife left me, and my children wanted nothing to do with me," Mr. Nguyen reflected, his voice filled with regret. "I thought success would bring me happiness, but in the end, I was left with nothing." Now at 50, Mr. Nguyen longs for the family he lost. He realizes that the greatest failure in life is to end up alone, without the love and support of family. His story is a powerful reminder that material possessions mean little without the people who matter most. 3. Financial stability, planning for the future. Mrs. Tu, a retired nurse, understood the importance of financial stability as she approached her later years. Unlike many of her peers, she was careful to save for retirement, ensuring that she wouldn't have to rely on her children for financial support. "When I needed surgery, I used my own savings to cover the cost," Mrs. Tu said. "My son still took time off work to care for me, but I didn't want to burden him financially." Her story highlights the importance of planning for retirement and securing financial independence. "Being financially stable allows me to live with dignity and without putting extra strain on my children," she explained. 4th, a positive mental state, the key to joyful aging. As we age, maintaining a positive mental state becomes essential for overall well-being. A positive mindset can improve physical health, enhance decision-making, and strengthen relationships. Studies show that individuals with good emotional health experience fewer chronic illnesses and recover more quickly from health setbacks. At 50, happiness is more than just a feeling, Mr. Nguyen explained. It's a mindset that allows you to enjoy life, make better choices, and find peace in the things that truly matter. For many, reaching 50 is a turning point, a time to reflect on the past, let go of regrets, and embrace the joy that comes from living authentically. It's a time to focus on health, family, and inner peace, rather than chasing material success. Conclusion: embracing the wisdom of aging. As we grow older, the wisdom we gain from life's experiences becomes our greatest asset. Through the stories of Mr. Lee, Mrs. Nguyen, Mr. Chu, and others, we see the importance of solitude, mindful communication, and focusing on what truly matters in life: health, family, financial stability, and a positive mental state. Aging is not something to be feared, but embraced. It is a time to let go of the superficial and focus on the deeper, more meaningful aspects of life. Whether it's finding peace in solitude, nurturing the relationships that matter most, or taking care of our health and financial stability, the lessons of aging lead us to a life of fulfillment and joy. So, as you reflect on these stories, consider how you can apply their wisdom to your own life. Cherish your health, strengthen your relationships, and find peace in the simple moments. Life is short, but the lessons we learn along the way make it truly meaningful. Thank you for joining us on this journey of wisdom. If these stories resonate with you, let us know in the comments. We value your feedback and appreciate your time.